Hey, what is going on guys? RvzStealth here, and in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the best junglers for patch 6.19. So first up is going to be Vi. Now Vi isn't a jungler we've seen too much of this season. She really hasn't been in the meta very often aside from these past few patches. The reason I think Vi is seeing more play now and the reason I think she's stronger is because number one, a lot of the other junglers have been nerfed recently. Vi hasn't been nerfed. I think that she might have got a buff a few patches ago, but she definitely has not been nerfed recently. We are also seeing a lot of immobile mids and AD carries being played right now, and it's just really easy for Vi to isolate those targets in a team fight with her ultimate, which makes her just a great pick if the enemy team does lock someone like a Syndra mid or a Lux or a Twisted Fate, because unless they get a Zhonya's, then it's going to be pretty easy pickings for Vi in every single team fight, just a point and click ult onto them, and as long as her team does follow up, then it should be a pretty free kill. She also does have quite a few versatile build paths. You can go for like AD assassin type Vi and go like warrior into Trinity Force and then just more damage after that if your team is lacking damage, and you could also go for like a tankier build on her. You can go like Cinder Hulk. I tried this build in the gameplay here. I went Cinder Hulk, and I also went for like a Sterix Gauge, a Titanic Hydra, and I was pretty tanky with those items, yet I still did quite a bit of damage. She's also really good because she's got a pretty strong level 3 gank because of her Q, and then her level 6 ganks are really good as well. You're pretty much guaranteed a free kill at level 6 as long as your laner or your bot lane does follow up. If they do have flash, then you should still be able to pick up the kill, just because if you hit your Q and follow up with your ultimate, that's a lot of chain CC right there. Now, as for when and when you shouldn't pick Vi, I would look to pick her if your team does lack engage or if you lack lockdown. If you don't have somebody that's able to get onto the back line, or you don't have somebody that's going to be able to engage a fight, then I would look to pick Vi for sure. Also, I would look to pick her if the enemy team does not have very many gap closers. If the AD carry on the enemy team is someone like a Misfortune or a Jhin or a Jinx, then definitely look to pick Vi. And I would try to avoid picking her if the enemy team does have a Morgana or a Janna, just because those champions can do really well against Vi. If Vi tries to ult on the AD carry, then Morgana can just black shield it, and as for Janna, she can just use her ultimate when Vi does try to dive in. Next up is going to be Nidalee. So Nidalee is arguably the best early game jungler in the game right now. Her early game pressure is just really strong, and a good Nidalee player can absolutely carry the early game and just end a game before the 25-minute point. She's got really good gank potential in the early game if she can hit her spear. If that spear hits when you do gank with her, you're guaranteed to burn the enemy's flash, just because the damage follow-up that you have in your Cougar form is really good. She also does do a really good job at just snowballing the early game. If you can get a few kills on Nidalee, then you can just go crazy. Once you do get like your Runic Echoes, your Rylai's, and your Lichbane, your damage is insane, and you also do have really good sticking power with that Rylai. So once you get to that 3 item spike on Nidalee, if you can hit that like before the 25-minute point, then you're gonna be super strong. She also does have some really good clears in the jungle once she does get Runic Echoes. She doesn't have the best clears in the early game, so like the first few levels, but once she does get that item, then she becomes a monster at clearing the jungle. Now, as for when and when you should not pick Nidalee, look to pick her if your team does lack AP damage. Also, pick her against a weak early game jungler and try to take advantage of that. If the enemy team does have a jungler like a Shyvana or a Warwick, or just a jungler that's not going to do too much pre-6, then look to abuse that, look to try to gank a lot, look to try to invade them and just shut them down and just get a nice snowball going in the early game. I would not pick her though unless you've practiced her, so I would recommend trying her in normal games a little bit at least before you do play her in ranked, because I've definitely seen some pretty bad Nidalees in ranked that just don't really know what they're doing, and if you do fall behind with her in the early game, then she isn't going to be the strongest. Also, try to avoid picking her against Soraka or Sona. The reason being is because if you're playing against Soraka, your poke isn't really going to do too much because she can heal it up, and also when you try to pounce in, even if you do hit the spear, then Soraka can place down her silence and just completely negate any of your damage. So I would definitely try to avoid Soraka and Sona as well. Next up is going to be Graves. So Graves is kind of the AD version of Nidalee in a sense that he does have a very strong early game and he also snowballs super hard. Once you get to your 3 item spike on Graves, you can do really well and you can pretty much solo carry a game. I've seen so many Graves players this patch just pretty much solo carrying because they deal so much damage. He does a lot of burst damage and he also does consistent damage, which just makes him a very strong pick. He's got the burst with his Q and his ultimate, and he's got consistent damage with his auto attack, so that makes him a pretty strong pick for sure. He also does have a lot of mobility in his kit with his E. I'm pretty sure whenever he auto attacks or when he uses an ability, the cooldown of his E does get reduced, so it just allows him to stay really mobile in team fights and kite around really nicely. He does have some of the best clears in the jungle too, just because of the way his passive works and the way that he can kite around the jungle camps. It just allows him to take pretty much no damage and it allows him to clear them out pretty fast. Now you can also pretty much build full damage on Graves and still be pretty tanky due to just the extra armor that he does get. I think that they're nerfing this on him next patch. I'm pretty sure he's not going to be as strong in 6.20, but as for 6.19, you can go like full damage Graves and you can still be so tanky. So when should you not pick Graves? Look to pick him if your team does lack damage. Graves is definitely one of the best damage junglers that you can play right now. I would not pick him though if your team does lack tank or if you lack engage. Don't be that player that last picks Graves when your team has like absolutely no engage, no way of getting onto the back line, because if it does reach the late game or if you do fall behind in the early game, it's going to be pretty hard for you to win that game. Also, I would look to pick him if you just want a hard carry jungler. I think that Graves is probably one of the best junglers right now if you want to just play a jungler that does a lot of damage and that can solo carry a game. Next up here is going to be the most banned champion in solo queue right now, and it's going to be Zac. So I pretty much ban Zac every single game because he's just so annoying and he's so hard to deal with when you are playing against him because of his long range engage. And in solo queue, teams aren't really coordinated very much. They don't really focus on like warding and just keeping vision of the Zac. So if the Zac gets into a spot where he can charge up his E and just dive onto the back line, it's so hard to just beat him if he can get nice ease off and if he can get onto the back line, use his CC, because he still does pretty good damage, and if he gets that E off like on the AD carry, he'll chunk them to around half HP, and if his team does follow up, then it's pretty much a free kill every single time. He can gank from unique places, which makes him a strong pick as well, so it's really hard to like ward against Zac in the early game because you need to have so many wards down. If you're playing bot lane and you don't have a Sightstone finish, then there's no way that you're going to be able to ward every single area against Zac, and it just allows him to gank really effectively in the early game. He's also pretty tanky, but he still does a lot of damage, and he's great against the low mobility AD carries that are being played right now. So when should you not look to pick Zac right now? So if Zac isn't banned, then I would definitely look to pick him for sure, but if the enemy team does have some good disengage or some ability to protect the AD carry really nicely, then you might want to reconsider picking Zac in that situation. So if the enemy team does have a Janna or a Lulu or just somebody that can keep the AD carry safe, it's going to be harder to pull off Zac successfully. Even if you get an E on the back line, the Janna can just knock you away and the Lulu can just use her ultimate on whoever you dive on to knock you off. So unless you're really confident on your Zac, then I would maybe pick one of the other junglers on my list in those situations. And to round out this video, at the number 1 spot is going to be Skarner. So right now, Skarner's been tearing up solo queue these past few patches. He's a pretty easy but very effective jungler. You really only need one damage item on Skarner to deal a lot of damage, being the Trini Force. After that, you can go full tank and you can still do so much with him. He's great at all stages of the game too. He's got a pretty good level 3 gank with his E. His level 6 gank is also pretty good with his ultimate. And then once the game does does reach the 35 to 40 minute point, Skarner actually has one of the highest win rates for any jungler. If you do fight a Skarner in his shrines in a late game team fight, he's probably going to win that every single time. And if the game does come down to like a Baron fight or a Dragon fight and you've got your shrine as Skarner, then it's going to be really easy for you to just look for that engage on the back line because you are going to have the movement speed. You can go for that flash ult on the enemy AD carry, and if you do get that off, then it's going to be pretty easy for your team to just follow up and end up bursting that target down. He's also great against the dive champions that are being played right now because all he has to do is use his ultimate on whoever's trying to dive onto his AD carry, and it's pretty much a free kill after that. He's got pretty good sticking power as well with his E. If he does end up getting close to a target, he hits that E on them, and he does have his ultimate available as well, then they're pretty much dead as long as his team is with him. So when should you not look to pick Skarner? He's a pretty good pick in most situations right now, but I would try to avoid pretty much the same like that you want to avoid with Zac. Just try to avoid those disengage comps or those comps that are really good at protecting the AD carry, just because it's going to be harder for Skarner to look for that flash ult or try to engage on the back line. So the honorable mentions for this patch are going to be Evelyn, Kha'Zix, Amumu, Sejuani, Shaco, Hecarim, and Rammus. So I want to talk about Evelyn here. Evelyn is definitely a much stronger pick right now. She's kind of been creeping up these past few patches, and I feel like this patch, she is definitely very strong. So Evelyn does have one of the best early games for any jungler right now, and because we're seeing a lot less Rek'Sai recently, and because like just a lot of the other junglers have been nerfed, Evelyn is definitely a lot stronger now, and she can do a lot better in the early game. So when you are playing Evelyn, just make sure you do go aggressive in the early game. Try to get those ganks off, because if you do, then you can snowball the early game out of control. So that is going to be all for this video, guys. If you did enjoy, then don't forget to leave a like, subscribe if you guys have not already. So thanks for watching, have an awesome day, and I will see you in my next video.